So good morning, good afternoon, good part of the day, everyone. Welcome to the largest and fastest growing large-scale Scrum meetup. This one is based out of New York City, but it's frankly global. So we welcome and we have people from all over the globe joining us. Today we have our two special guests, good and well-respected dear colleagues of mine for many years. I've known them both, Erin Perry and JP White. So just to do justice, I will give a quick intro of both. So Erin has been around financial services technology for many years. She was involved in agile software delivery, or- organizational changes. Ask you guys all to be on mute, please. Um, she has been, a Java and database developer for public cloud training, and she's done a lot of coaching and mentoring throughout her career. She's a developer and architect, tech coach, and agile coach. Um, Her specialty specifically in agile transformations, the above mentioned coaching, training, teaching. She's also, well versed with Kanban, Scrum, uh, you know, Java, SQL, DB2, TDD, ATDD, AWS. So all those, you know, badly used these days acronyms, right? So that's Erin. So and her good friend and partner in crime for many years, JP White. A lot of what's the above. Also, what has been mentioned about Erin. Also, tons of experience in infrastructure automation, application development and support, DevOps, and cloud solutions. And from what I know personally firsthand, Erin and JP have been around the industry and to various large investment institutions and have gained lots of shared experience. They know a lot in common. They work closely together. And today they will be sharing their experience with all of us, specifically around building organizational design and standing up internal coaching and agile, you know, leadership practice organizationally. So without any further ado, I'll pass on to Erin and JP, and the floor is yours. Please let us know what we need to know.
Thanks, Gene.
Yep.
Cool. So JP, can you just confirm that share came through?
I can see it. Yes.
Sweet.
Very
Awesome.
large orange screen in front of me here.
Yeah. So Gina did some of our work for us. So normally we would start with explaining who on earth we are and why we're here. We'll do a little bit of brief of that for why you should listen to us. But one of the things that we're really passionate about. So JP and I, we've been working together now for a few years, but as like one-on-one partners now for almost a full year. So that'll be like next month, I think, is our 1 year work anniversary for what it is we've been doing. And we are incredibly passionate about doing things with integrity and taking great pride in everything that we do. And it doesn't matter if that's us leading a silly little workshop with Legos or if that's us writing a serverless application and deploying that out to prove that that technology can work. Whatever it is, we take great pride
That's
in.
what we do.
Yeah. So, and we try to spread that across to other people. So our day job now is to advocate for that, to make the lives of developers great so that they can take pride in their work as well. So real quick, Gene did a little bit about this. So JP, just if you would quickly introduce yourself, anything you want to add on to what Gene shared there?
I like the slide version of it here. It's just easier for me to talk to. But yeah, hi everyone, JP White. Like the slide says, I've kind of been around in highly regulated organizations between the finance industry and government for nearly 25 years. Much of that was in infrastructure and automation, operating systems, DevOps. Spent about my first 7-8 years or so doing that. Then moving into application development, ultimately into cloud architecture, cloud development, a lot of automation, a lot of tool chain is kind of my bread and butter.
Cool. And then, so JP and I, just like all teams, have complementary skill sets. So where he's focused largely on automation and spent a good deal of time in infrastructure, I've spent almost my entire career on the software side of the house. So specifically OO and database, as Jean was talking about, dabbled in literally everything. So career generalists, kind of both of us career generalists. Like,
Absolutely the
yeah,
case.
so spreading our knowledge around and working and dabbling in things. For the last 10 or so years, my primary focus has been agile transformation. So trying to figure out how to take these large, messy, bureaucratic organizations and point them to a healthier way of working. We're both passionate about making the world of work a great place to be where developers can thrive and do great work. So getting stuff out of our way, and whether that be hierarchy and control or tools or process, whatever it is, breaking those barriers down. And we get to come at that from both a senior perspective, because we're in pretty senior roles now, as well as a hands-on perspective, because we still consider ourselves developers. So a little bit of everything. That's what we do. Why you should listen to us is because we're not just telling you this. We live this.
We've
Everything we're
done
doing
every
today.
single bit of this.
And
Yes.
to that point, everything we'll talk about today is personal experience. None of this is going to be this book says you should do it. None of this is going to be we heard from a consultant this is how it should be. Everything we share is going to be real things that we've actually done, that we've lived, that we are going to share with you so you can learn from them, good, bad, and ugly. All right, so let's dig in. I wanted to start with just a couple slides before JP tells our first story here. And we're going to be talking a lot today about teams that are leading things. And we're going to bring it home at the end to talk about specifically like large scale transformation teams, though we're going to talk about lots of other kinds of teams. But just keeping in your head what many traditional transformation teams look like. And this is true whether it's like an agile transformation organization or a cloud transformation team or somebody that's trying to change the way developers work, that you end up with teams that reflect the organization that they came from and tend to still carry that culture over. So you end up with a lot of former PMOs or centers of excellence, people coming together, really trying to do their best work, but hampered by the culture they just came from and the skills and the toolbox they have because of that. So you end up with a lot of transformations pitched in Gantt charts. Here's the plans and dependencies and phases. Here's where we expect to be by June 3rd, by August 3rd, et cetera, and all of the dependencies to take there. You end up with a lot of working groups. Kind of your, it's the tool belt they have. The organizations tend to be structured very hierarchically. So you've got somebody in charge of it, and then they have managers with the different teams that report to them, and they tend to have these silos that they work in. You also see a thinker-doer separation. Just the same as you'd have architects separate from the developers, you often have model designers separate from the coaches or separate from people implementing it. So you see those same kinds of separations between the people that are going to think very hard about what the transformation should be and the people that are expected to then execute on that transformation, which is in the tool belt. That's it's from the culture they just came out of. And because of that, you also end up with individuals, like people working individually with assigned work. So here you work on that, you work on that, and these very rigid rules and structures that they're rolling out. So all of these individuals get assigned, you come up with the one true best way of doing this, and then roll out that rigid solution to the organization, and they're expected to embrace that. What we see though is in that little parentheses there where it says for others. Um, Very rarely do we see those rigid rules being applied internally. So you end up with rigid rules and structures being rolled out externally. You go do this. This is how you should transform to cloud. This is how you should be agile. But we're not going to work that way. We're going to work in the way that works, that suits best to what it is we're trying to do. So lots of carryover from from the culture they came out of. Lots of very limited, shallow tool belt. So you only know a couple ways to solve a problem. So you keep applying those same ways. And then that results in some really weird things where you're trying to transform an organization, but you're using the same old ways of thinking and the same old ways of structuring to do so. So keep that in your head. That may not, obviously, your mileage may vary. This is not every transformation organization. That's why I put traditional in front of it. Keep that in your head as a counterpoint to some of the stories that JP and I are going to share with you today. As we're sharing, we're going to come back to the slide at the end. This is just your menu for the day. So we're going to share 4 stories that talk about these 4 different concepts. I'm not going to go into them right now because I think the stories are more powerful. We'll come all the way back around to these to talk about ways that you can, rather than build a transformation team or a leadership team that is built on old ways of thinking, old ways of working, that you can start to build one that inspires envy And because I believe in test-driven everything, that is normally the test I'm applying to when we're designing an org like this. Are we going to build an org that people are fighting to join, that people are desperate to be a part of and are eager to listen and learn from? So all of this stuff will come to, but let's dig right in. So JP, are you ready to tell us our first story?
I am indeed.
Go for it.
Okay, so this is a little bit of a story about the importance of not scaling until you know that you're sure that you can and should. So delaying scaling at all costs and not learning all the lessons that you know that you need to learn before doing that. So I was once upon a time a part of an amazing team, probably the best team that I had been a part of in my career, full of just amazing expertise, led by an amazingly distinguished, engineers and architects that were kind of steering everything. Our management was made up of agilists. It was an absolutely beautiful thing. And I truly believed it was a righteous cause as well. We were enabling public cloud services for an internal organization. Basically, our goal was to kind of wrap security and compliance around cloud services, and then re-offer them as services to our internal developer clients. We first started the team. It was a team of 6 people that included our senior most manager, our manager, and myself and engineer peers. For the first 4 months of our project, we essentially worked in a shadow organization. It was offline. We were playing with toys that were not yet permitted in the enterprise, so we had to do everything on personal devices, home internet, everything else. And we worked as basically a startup. And we worked as a startup for about 4 months and had to figure out how we needed to work. We figured that out. We got some really, really satisfying prototypes of a few of our first services and made fantastic progress. At this point, the organization wants to bring us back into the fold. We do everything within the boundaries of the enterprise, and the work that we did in the first 4 months looked good enough that some of the management at the time decided that, okay, we're ready to scale, we're ready to do more. These first 3 or 4 things look pretty rocking, but we need more. Let's get to it. So let's scale this thing out. So our very, very close, very nimble, very agile team of 6 over a relatively short period of time became like 50, like 5 teams. A lot of heat loss got introduced. Very, very difficult all of a sudden to coordinate between 5 different teams that are all over the globe. Did our absolute best to do that, but that's physics, right? You're separated by distance. They're not sitting on the phone with you every day or sitting next to you in the office. There's going to be some heat loss there. And the other things that prematurely scaling happened were related not just to communication, but code quality started to suffer. It was difficult to have the same base level of education, and we started to over-specialize in certain areas. And we were able to have our senior leader with us coding for the first 4 months. The message, the clarity, and the vision was very, very consistent. But then that, as you started to scale out, started to dilute. And it wasn't very clear where we were going day to day. Priorities were not, were communicated, but you get a lot lost in translation because there's a lot more layers and a lot more handoffs. So not all of the messages came across loud and clear as they once did. So there was all of these things that all of a sudden are working against us, and ultimately we had to kind of pivot and redesign the thing eventually because of a lot of the technical debt that we incurred by scaling too quickly and not taking care and focus and doing it in a more controlled manner. We kind of jumped the gun. We went all in. We scaled up too fast, and then the next thing you know, the bridge can't support its own weight. So it's a painful story for me sometimes to tell. Still, I had to sit here and tell the story with a talking toy in my hand. But it has happened to me twice. But this was easily the most visible and most painful, personally painful thing, because the team was just absolutely so great and set up in so many ways to succeed. But simple things ultimately caused it to go kind of sideways.
Mm. I love that story, JP, for a couple reasons. It shows how easy it is to go wrong. So even when you start with everything looking like you're on the right path, how easy it is if you take your eye off the ball to see things slip away. I also love it because there's some good stuff in there. So I always believe in learning lessons even from things that fell apart. The divide after you conquer thing is something that we've talked about. Oftentimes when we look at a hard problem to solve, especially at scale. So we work in these gigantic organizations with tens of thousands of people, and it seems like the first thing you should do is take the problem and break it apart and give a piece to this team and a piece to this team and get 100 people working on it. When if we take the lesson from software architecture as well as organizational architecture, really what you should do is get a small group of very smart people to solve the hard problems together before you ever consider breaking it apart. And that's the divide after you conquer. And some of that is like right out of the LeSS recommendations, even when they talk about architecture and the kinds of ways you should be structuring, solving the hard problems first with a small team before you even consider breaking apart, which is something you guys tried to do. So awesome story there.
Yeah, and the other thing that I want to put out there too is that even when you're when you know what you think you know what you're doing, right? You've got all of the things in your favor. It's still easy to miss even the little things that you know. Like, you've read about them, you study them, you try to work around them, you acknowledge that they're there, but they can still jump up and bite you without being aware of it sometimes. So.
So I'm going to talk about another team here that actually similar to JP's teams. He was talking about they had like ridiculously good talent. I'm going to tell another story about that. This year, JP and I both read the Netflix book, the No Rules Rules book, and there was something in it, like a nugget that really hit me, and it's this concept of talent concentration or talent density, and making sure that you are keeping great people together, and if you guard that, you don't have to worry so much about controls and structure. And that rattled my brain for a while and made me think about the teams I'd been on that had talent density and the stuff we got away with versus those that I've been on, especially transformation teams that did not. So many times when we go to form transformation teams or these leadership teams that are supposed to be leading the way, uh, how the ways people get on those teams is a little random. So it could be that you happen to be in an org that now is going to lead agile transformation. So guess what? Now you're an agile transformation leader. Congratulations, start learning. It could be that it was a senior leader, somebody who's charismatic or good at teaching. Maybe the person that pitched agile transformation now leads it, and they bring in people that they trust, whether they have experience or not. And what we end up with in many transformation teams I've been on is actually very low talent concentration. So a group of people that are new to this and don't necessarily have deep expertise, and then they struggle to attract talent because super smart, highly involved, very well educated agilists don't want to come and be junior to a bunch of people that are just starting out and think they know better. So that's a self-reinforcing loop. So low skill attracts low skill. We see the same thing on development teams. Team in a group that I was JP and I actually were both a part of, looked at this very differently. So rather than building a bunch of these teams that were going to be accelerators or cloud catalysts, so teams that were meant to lead the way and help other teams become great on their cloud journey, on their agile journey, and like a whole pile of stuff we were supposed to help them with. You really have two ways of forming new groups like that. You can take existing groups and repurpose them. You can draft and kind of bring people into that, or you can start from scratch, hire a few seeds, and then build teams around those seeds. That second bit, I've seen way more success in, and that is how these teams were formed. So each of these teams was had a seed person was picked to kind of be the core, the anchor of that team, and then they very carefully surrounded themselves with people that were highly skilled, highly respected, and had complementary skill sets to form these little units that could then go and help any team on their journey to public cloud, on their journey to becoming excellent engineering teams. And because of this, the teams were like, they inspired envy. People were very jealous of the things that we got to do on them, of the kinds of people that were there. And I've worked from home for most of my career. I've always lived pretty far away from wherever my home base is, and it takes a lot to motivate me to come in. When I was on this team, I was in the office almost every day because we had a team room and it was collaborative and energizing. We made each other smarter. We were trying to outread and outlearn each other. We were constantly challenging each other to get better and sharpening each other's skills. So I was coming in with agile expertise. JP was there with public cloud expertise. We had members of our team that came from like deep language backgrounds, had been in all over the organization, and we all got to come together and make each other better. And because of that, people left us alone. We got to do basically whatever it is we wanted to do that we thought was the right thing to do. So whether that meant spending a bunch of money throwing a ridiculous party to help people get to cloud and bringing in t-shirt vendors, and or if it was setting up a workshop, or like I said, getting our own little special team room even though nobody else had them, we almost had a blank check because we had proven competency and because we could be trusted. The more of that we build, the better. I rarely see that in the agile space. I've seen it quite a few times, and JP just gave another example in the development space where we understand that bringing great developers together breeds more great developers. In the agile transformation space, I tend to see talent dilution where we're in such a rush to try to put these teams together, in such a rush to try to scale so quickly, that there are one or two great people and very few that have deep experience, and then that degrades and degrades. So it's something that I worry about greatly. I would much rather have a transformation leadership team that had 10 amazing people that were able to really lead the way and be very careful with how they spent their time than a transformation team of 100 people that were of average skill and experience. So that's the thing I'm always looking at. Are you sharpening each other? Is everybody great? If you're going to be leading the way, you better be worth following. And that's the thing I keep in my head. I want that feeling of being challenged and excited to come to work every day by the things I'm learning from my colleagues. JP, to that end, you want to tell them a little bit about integrity and tell a story here, but living what you stand for.
Sure. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about what Erin and I are up to right now. So we have formed a developer relations program within our organization. And it is modeled, I'll just like most other ones are, honestly. We took a lot of inspiration from like Google's developer advocacy program. Red Hat has a very interesting one as well, and across the industry to try to put something together that that it solves or attempts to solve a few of the problems that we see, especially with development teams in terms of adopting modern practices, agility, all of the things that we kind of teased earlier in the talk. And our whole goal is around making developers better, their lives better, to make development fun. In a lot of organizations, it can kind of suck. And it doesn't have to be that way. So we are a strong advocacy team, and that requires us to build a lot of trust with the teams that we're trying to coach and mentor and make better and enable great things for, and all of the internal service providers and leadership teams and and management structures that have to work, and we have to balance all of this. And the only way that we've been able to do it successfully is it partially to do with integrity, but it was a lot about building trust. And it was having and acting with very high integrity all the time, being very, very clear about who we were attempting to help, why it's important, what we're trying to do, why we're having these conversations, why we might be pushy or where we might not care about things so much. It was always in service for the development community. We never told them to do anything we weren't willing to do. We sat with them side by side to help them work through their problems, to demonstrate that we care, to demonstrate that, to Erin's earlier point, that we're worth following, that we know what we're doing, and to establish that trust. And you can't do that with, you have to walk the walk and you have to talk the talk. And too many times we have seen organizations that that just frankly don't. And it is easy for people to disengage from them. It's easy to disregard their opinions because you don't see them living and practicing what they're preaching. And that has just, it's been the kiss of death in so many different things that we've observed, especially when you're talking about organizations that tend to centralize big functions and are more of a command control environment by nature. Perhaps they're more risk motivated or motivated to mitigate risk, so they're very risk cautious. Those organizations tend to behave in a certain way that where integrity can easily die if not jealously guarded. So everything that Erin and I have been doing is trying to rewrite that history a little bit and prove that when you behave in a certain way with high integrity, with shared core values, and really, really demonstrate the care for the community that you're serving, doors really start to open, things really start to move, you start getting a lot of momentum, you get to do some really fun things, and people start inviting you in, that you're doing a good job because all of a sudden everybody wants to hear what you have to say and wants to get your opinion about something. And that's when you've started to hit, I kind of hit gold.
Yeah, the pancakes are on this slide because we feel very firmly in eating our own pancakes. We don't serve dog food to people because we serve you things that we're perfectly willing to do ourselves. We're very careful about that. We also hold ourselves to a higher standard than we hold other people. So we jealously guard our whip. There's only two of us, and we've learned we are both easily distracted. The weeks when we're less careful about what it is we have in progress and less careful about getting things to done are weeks we get nothing done. And when we come back to that, we see with that strong motivation to done drives us to roll things out very quickly and reflect on them fast. So we live everything we're asking other people to do. When we code together, we do it with care. We are very clear about how important testing is to what we do.
We're kind of brutal to each other.
Yeah. So we hold each other to that standard of that's not good enough. We need to do better. And because we believe in that, but also helps us learn. So when people come to us and ask us how, we can teach them from experience. So we can say, this is how we did it, or this is how we've done it before. We can consult, not just coach. So that really puts us in a position where we can speak from personal firsthand experience about what it's like to work on a pull model. We do everything whole team. So that's why I was saying before we started the recording, JP and I are on the phone all day, every day, talking to each other. Everything we do, we pair on. It's very rare when we diverge and then we quickly merge again. So we really hold ourselves to this ridiculously high standard because it's really important that people trust us and that we can speak from personal experience about the ways that we want people to work. We're not going to tell anyone to work in a way we literally are not working ourselves.
And it's so much easier to follow a leading team than it is to read a bunch of documentation and then say, okay, everyone, go figure it out now. Having a blueprint, having something that you can model after, imperfect it may be, is something that is just incredibly valuable.
And to that end, we've never had to push ourselves on anyone. So almost a year now in this new role, not a single time have we said we are coming or will you please let us come. We work entirely on pull right now, which means we have a deeper backlog of demand than we can satisfy, which is an amazing place to be. as a consulting group, that we don't have to actually push, that people are coming to us more than we're going to them. It's a good spot to be.
Yeah, took a lot to gain that, but once you have it, yeah, have to guard it.
Yeah. All right. So my last story here, before we wrap up and open the floor for conversation, is about the last large transformation I was involved in which I served as product owner for the transformation. And I'm calling this one Dance Backwards in Heels, which if you're unfamiliar, is what Ginger Rogers always had to do when she's dancing with Fred Astaire. Like, if you're impressed by how good of a dancer Fred Astaire was, Ginger Rogers had to do it all backwards and in heels. And that's the kinds of things that I expect. So JP and I were just saying we hold ourselves to a higher standard. If a transformation team is doing everything on hard mode, trying to apply, for instance, as I did, less to a non software context in a globally distributed team with a group of people that have never done it before, if you can do it on hard mode, no one has any excuses anymore. So if you can prove, guess what, we're doing it against all of these forces in a situation and context, but it doesn't really apply to, but we're still making it happen, all of a sudden now everything else looks easier in comparison. And now you can actually serve as a living example of how to do things and how to make stuff happen. So I served as product owner in a transformation that was organized as though we were a less product. And we decided to do that so that we could take all of us who had varied experiences with less and actually live it, because there's no better way to learn something than to do it, to play the game. So we did. And we structured ourselves, even though it was weird and uncomfortable and trying to figure out how to do it, into feature teams. So what it ended up looking like is this. So I served as product owner, which at scale, so this is a large product. We actually were towards the upper limit of the a good size of a product. We had 10 teams that were global, so we tried to keep them as location based as possible. So we ended up with a few teams in Delaware, a few teams in Ohio, a couple in India, 10 teams globally. And they were structured as we call them transformation teams. They were cross skilled. So we had all different kinds of coaching and consulting skills on the teams, as well as we tried to spread around organizational understanding of process and policies, some technical writing, facilitation, instructional design, as best we could. And just like any feature team, they either had the skills or they were empowered to gain those skills in some way. The person that was helping them do that was our people manager. So my partner in all of this. So I had no one reporting to me, and that is my life's goal, is to have that continue forever. I have no direct reports. I had no direct reports here. I just served as product owner. So I was just there to help make sense of vision, direction, and break ties on priority. The people manager was just a people manager. So he had no say in what it is they were working on or how they were going to do it. His entire focus was on building the capabilities of the people on these teams. And that was true whether they were consultants or employees. He was meeting with them regularly, figuring out what do they know, what do they need to know, and how are they going to get that information. He was also helping keep me in check. So when I would overstep my bounds, because I've been a coach so long and they were doing a job I'd done, it was really tempting for me to tell them that's not how I would do it. He was a good partner in saying, you're the product owner, that's not your role, and keeping me out of the how, as well as brokering feedback because I was in a senior position. So it helped then keep them even with me because they could use him to amplify feedback to me. We also had scrum masters for all of these teams. And let me tell you, there is no better place to put a senior scrum master than learning how to scrum master teams filled with agilists, because doctors make terrible patients, agilists make terrible team members. So they would rebel against everything. They didn't want to do retrospectives and like all of the same things that you see from a normal team. You're going to see times 10 from Agilus because they're a little bit outside of it. And it's the first time in a long time they've been on a team like this. So these Scrum Masters were really having to come to the top of their game and really learning very quickly, both from the people they were coaching and from coaching them. So the Scrum Masters here are some of the best Scrum Masters I've ever worked with. And they learned a ridiculous amount in a short period of time. And many of them are now out coaching in the field now because of what they learned there while they were in that role. We tried to keep it as close to less as we could. So I managed intake with a Kanban board with a simple intake form. The teams really owned their own refinement because I was working at scale. I was not writing the backlog items. Instead, I was there helping advise them on direction, priority. The teams, because we were working at scale, you'd still see some things like leading teams or component guardianship around specific engagements. So a team would stay with an engagement, but oftentimes they would pull on another team to help with something they didn't have skill or experience in. So just like in the LeSS software, there was no code ownership, there is no engagement ownership. Even though they're leading the engagement, other teams would often come and help them. Same thing with playbooks and models and metrics and anything we were doing. A team may be the leading team on that, or maybe the component guardian of that, but other teams can and would often contribute. And it was messy and it was imperfect and we made a million mistakes, but it was the best on the ground learning I've ever seen to take a group of people and really get them to the point where they could coach other groups about LeSS in context because they were living it. And to see the talent that has come out of that group has been ridiculous. So amazing coaches that are all over the world now that got boot camped because this really was a crucible where they had to learn quickly and support each other. And we had groups of 6 people all at the top of their individual games making each other better rather than each individual person out trying to coach on an island by themselves. So this is my favorite way of working. It was awesome. As with all failed transformations, it was rolled back by a leadership change. So you can just you all have the list of why transformations fail. Leadership change, gone. Uh, I would say though, if I had my druthers, this is what I would get back to again and again and again, and keep enhancing and refining and learning from it. And this is, I think, where we're headed right now as well. And so much of the way that JP and I work is informed by what was learned through all of these stories we just told. JP, do you want to talk about I talked about test driven everything, and how do you know if you're doing well? What should it feel like if you've done something that really makes this work? What are the kinds of things you should hear or see here?
So this is interesting. So that I have context in this one from an engineering team, as well as the team that the role that we're playing right now, and one previously, which is like this big advocacy thing. And I always think that, imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, and I stick to that. When you see teams trying to emulate some behavior of yours or some process of yours, just trying in some way to be like you, that is an indication that you are on the right path, that you are doing the right things. It's not foolproof, of course, because if you're not doing the right things, then you're kind of poisoning your organization. But assuming that you're doing all of the right things and people are emulating you, seeking help from you, like Erin and I said earlier, we don't have to push any of our services onto people. We don't have to sell ourselves or our product. People come to us asking for us advice, wanting our input, wanting to collaborate, asking us to join or lead communities of practice, are envious of the fun that we're having, are envious of the new tech that we get to play with, or the amount of influence that we have at high levels of the organization, not because we're at high levels of the organization, just because someone liked something that we said and wanted us to come in and say more. Those types of things are really, really great indicators that you're doing the right thing. It's not too dissimilar from, like social media scoring from a measurement point of view. It's about reach and influence. And if you can, find some interesting ways effectively to gain followers, to collaborate more, to start changing hearts and minds on all of the things that you're trying to do as part of your transformation organization. The more people that you have standing up and wanting to know what you have to say or trying to behave or emulate you, the better.
So just to bring it home, and then let's talk. If you want to build a leadership team, whether you're leading agile transformation or any change across your organization, the best way that we found of doing it is to build an org that inspires envy. So you are worth following. People listen to what you have to say, not because of hierarchy or because of the position you're in or because it's a mandate, but because they really believe that you know what you're talking about and that you're living that and they want to be like you. So people will follow you naturally rather than you having to push them. You're pulling. And delay scaling is our first piece of advice. So build that core first. Avoid scaling if you can as long as possible, which is just the less advice in general. Guard your talent density. Make sure that you're only bringing in people that are great or have the potential to be great so that you don't have to worry about them. You can trust them. You can trust them to do great things. Eat your own pancakes, live what you do, and then that way you're both gaining experience and the trust of the organization. And then do it on hard mode. If you can prove that it can be done in a weird context with random people, like whatever you can do, then everything else, no one else has any excuse. You can point to yourself and say, "We're doing it."
That one is the one that is just so important to me. Is the hard mode.
Yeah.
There is. I mean, it's a little bit of a tell. There is nothing more satisfying for me to prove somebody wrong by going and doing it and saying, "See, I told you so." And having done that trying to do that and prove that you can do it on the hardest setting in in an organization or as part of a culture or under some kind of control that really works against you in significant ways, and then finding ways around that to meet the goal, and then demonstrating that is such a powerful communication device as well.
Indeed. It's also it's been the core of our mantra. So like when we have team values, doing the right thing, especially when it's hard, is always important for us. So even though, I see a question about an example of doing things on hard mode. LeSS is not meant for transformation teams. Like it's meant for software delivery organizations, right? That is the whole structure of it. That is what it's designed for. Applying it outside of that context can be done, but you're going to have to figure out what pair programming means to you. What does test driven development mean to you? What does it mean to refine a backlog item that is a coaching engagement rather than a piece of software you're going to deliver? So taking all of that and figuring out how to apply it, and we did. We figured out what mobbing and pairing was, what test driven development was, what backlog refinement was. If we could do it in that context, then it gave very few excuses to people that couldn't apply it to mainframe development, to things that were slightly off maybe the core Java path. So anytime we can find that we can really apply things in a difficult context, or what JP's saying, maybe we can swoop in and with no knowledge, Google it and figure it out in half an hour and make it happen, rather than waiting for permission. That stuff is really important. So now is the time for questions, discussion, anything else that's on your mind. You can feel free to drop it in chat or just hop off mute and come on and join the conversation. But I always use this break to get a quick sip of water.
Oh, that was so smart. I should have
Right?
done that. Darn it.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, JP. Folks, the floor is open. We got about 13 minutes, 12, 13 minutes remaining. Please don't hesitate to ask. Just speak up. I have a few interesting pings directly to me in private, so I'll reserve my right to post it to Erin and JP.
Cool.
But go ahead and ask questions.
And while we're waiting, there was another one from Vladimir about what did the Scrum Masters have to do in my last story? To what do they have to learn very quickly to get on top of their game? Facilitation skills. So if you get a group of agile coaches or people that are leading transformations in a room, they all have opinions on how that retro should be run. They've run a million themselves, and they all have in their head this is what should happen. And they tend to give that annoying feedback of that's not how I would do it, or try to take control back. So our Scrum Masters very quickly had to learn how to own a room, how to run that room, and they had to know their stuff in such a way that they were unimpeachable. Like I had a facilitation strategy, I'm running it, we're going to come out with plans. So they really had to earn the respect of those coaches very quickly.
Thank you for that.
I have also one from Vladimir a little earlier, asking, and they provide a couple of examples of what it's like to, in practice, to demonstrate to a team that that you care for them. That's such a great question. In my experience, especially in large organizations, they're very hierarchical, as we tend to know, and everything rolls downhill. So the developers, generally being relatively low on the totem pole, they get a lot of things shoved on them, a lot of things done to them instead of being part of it. It can be demoralizing in a lot of places. So obviously, some places are fantastic, but if you are engaging with a team, it is important for me, at least, and what I do is just over empathize with them. Give them an opportunity to really vent their frustrations and just listen to them. Don't respond, don't offer solutions right away. Just sit there and listen to their frustrations and try to understand why they're doing what they're doing, why they're feeling the way that they're feeling, root cause of where it might be coming from. And it's almost like the first 20-30 minutes of our initial meetings are like a therapy session for them. And that is, it breaks down barriers. It is showing empathy. It is participating in those conversations, and and letting them know that you felt that way too. Being vulnerable, and then just putting yourself out there. When they see you doing it, they do the same thing. That builds a lot of trust really, really quickly. And whatever you tell them that you're going to do, you better do it. Demonstrate to them that when I make you a promise, I'm going to keep it. If I tell you that I'm going to come back with some information about anything, no matter how big or small, do it. And a few times of that type of really, really personal interaction really demonstrates care. They will come back to you. They will feel safe working with you. They will feel safe telling you things that they wouldn't tell other people. And you really get the best kind of information on how to help them in that context.
I will just say, it's talking about doing it on hard mode. Conscientiousness is not natural for JP or I. Um, I am a messy, distractible person. So like, but we believe in it so much that we work very hard on it. So if we promise something, we honor our promises. If we're supposed to be somewhere, we're there. If we've committed to do something, we make sure it happens, and we work for that. That is not a natural, like that is not an innate skill, because of how important it is to building those relationships and sustaining them. There's a question from Sue that I was going to take, which is, how do you reverse the transformation plan already underway in an organization? And I've had to do this many times. And as usual, there's no answer to this, right? There's no like, here's the way. But I always love to give, here's 3 things that might work. And I'm assuming the context here from reading some of the other messages is, many organizations have been under transformation. You get lots of support, people get excited, they go down a path, and because they often aren't running their transformation in an agile way, you are committed to that path. You have sunk cost bias, and we must keep going, and it only gets more rigid, more prescriptive the longer you're on that path. And now what do you do? Because organizations are not used to agile change, which is consistent and continuous, that kind of holacracy mindset of expect, like reorg should just be a thing that happens every hour. Like, who cares? Instead, we're used to these one and done punctuated equilibrium changes. So here's 3 things I wrote down that I've tried, that I've seen. Number 1, change the figurehead in front of the transformation. Doesn't even have to be an organizational change. So let's say it used to be Bob was the person that was like the transformation lead. Well, now it's Susan. Just changing that now gives you an excuse, especially for these large organizations. They're used to the new leader throwing away the old work and restarting. You don't even have to really do it. You could lie. Bob could still be in charge of it, but guess what? Susan front now. And now you have an excuse. Our leaders have changed, so now we have a chance to rethink what we're doing. So we're going to go down this path now. That is an option. It normally does happen when a new person comes in. Number 2, This was always the next wave. Wave one of the transformation was about establishing understanding. So that was the shoe part. And we were really prescriptive because we wanted everybody to learn this. Now wave two is going to come in, and now we're going to start releasing things and trying something a little different. So now it doesn't it doesn't look like you're actually like throwing away the work. It looks like now the next logical iteration is going to happen. I've inceptioned many leaders into doing this through maturity models. So if I'm the leader, it's easy. I could just do it. If I'm not, you can show them, okay, here's where you're at right now. Awesome. Baseline maturity. Where you're going to go next. What's the next level of maturity? Here's what I think should be in that maturity model, and that will require us to do these things. So that's option two. Option three is if you are really unempowered, so you're nowhere near that leader, and it's what JP and I call malicious compliance. I guess it's like how much of our career is built on.
Yeah.
Yeah, you figure out what the rules actually are, and it's less than you think it is. So whatever you think the rules are, whether it's like this is how you have to be agile or this is what tools you have to use, likely not the rules. And we've made a career out of having competence shield us from trouble. So if you are doing great work and you are delivering and your customers are happy and your team is really soaring and excelling, people will leave you alone. And then all of a sudden, more people will want to know why you're working and start copying what you're doing. So you have social proof now that you can start spreading the word and then shield yourself. That normally takes a very supportive manager. So somebody who's willing to take hits for you. But those are three ways. There's a gazillion more, I'm sure, but three ways that I've used to be able to kind of repivot an org that's on a weird path. JP, did you see anything else come
I
up in there?
do. I see one from Karen, who asked me some questions about my first story there, about what would I have done differently to achieve a better end, and some questions around how we would have potentially known when the right time to rejoin the larger organization was, versus when we kind of did it maybe a little bit prematurely. So there's a lot of things that I would have done differently, but I'm going to try to answer that question not from an engineering point of view, so I don't get lost in the weeds there, but just talking about it from an organization and in terms of agility. When we started that project, agility was natural. It was the default because that was very, very small team of very, very talented people. And there was a lot of trust amongst each other and up through our leadership that by default, the right things were going to happen. And it was easy because there were no systemic forces driving you in a different direction. Collaboration was natural. Continuous integration was natural. Learning together, challenging each other, all of that was natural behavior no one needed to teach. So staying in an environment like that for as long as possible is something I would have done differently if I could just wave a magic wand. So much so that I daydream about operationalizing that construct and then making that and showing enterprises that this is plausible. Every organization I have ever worked in my entire career has had a simpler process to ingest something that someone else has made rather than the process that exists within that same organization to make something for themselves. Not just software, anything, processes, policies, written document, it doesn't matter, whatever they're producing. It's almost always easier to just go get it from someplace else. I don't know why some organizations don't take that and use it to their advantage a little bit more. Spinning off smaller organizations, shadow organizations, to just go work in a way that whatever it is that they produce is digestible to a very, very large audience above and beyond just their own. It has some marvelous kind of side effects to it in terms of introducing both organizational and technical complexity. It doesn't happen as often because there's not as many opinions in play. being able to have very, very high quality out of the box because of fewer dependencies, fewer opinions, and your ability to work just very, very quickly. Much easier to not introduce technical debt, or if you are not organized optimally, when there is no rigid structure or system that forces you to keep something in place, you have the flexibility to do whatever it is that you want to over here, and just do anything that you need to produce a better product or to fix a problem or whatever the case may be. That freedom, that flexibility, and that autonomy to be able to just organize and do what you need to do, and everything else is out of your way. That environment is what allowed us to be as successful as we were. So the whatever needs to happen in that magic wand to make this environment last as long as humanly possible, and then not bringing that in unless we are forced to. Because ultimately what happens is that if you have this perfectly clean thing over here and you put it into admittingly, knowingly dirty water, it's never going to be that clean again. Eventually, it is just going to start absorbing the things that are around it, and it's going to look and behave just like everything else in that environment. And keeping it separate for as long as we did, that was the magic for me.
Thank you, JP. Just a quick question. My assumption is that you were not working in government environments. Is that correct?
Not in that story.
Bureaucratic, because you're usually working because someone won a contract and there's just everything is set in place, right, for moving forward. My experience, but maybe things are opening up a little bit in government. Have you found that or no?
Well, I haven't worked in government for a long time, so I can't say specifically around government. But I've heard those stories.
You've heard the stories. Okay, it's getting better. All right, thank you.
Yeah, we're not too far from DC, so I end up in a lot of the Agile Hangouts that are based in Washington, and they are strongly populated by lots of people that are working in government. And I'm starting to hear some decent things. As expected, they're so far behind because of all of the mess that they have to deal with. But um, I'm hearing some sparks of hope for how things are being looked at and worked, especially in some of the DC based software.
Yeah, I have a very, very close friend who's an agilist in the military, and they're doing some
The
amazing
military's
stuff.
actually always been ahead.
Yeah,
as far
they're
as
doing
Agile
some
goes.
amazing work in
Uh-huh.
a lot of impressive ways. Yeah.
Cool. All right, we got permission to go just a little bit longer, so thank you for those of us who are going to hang out. You're between me and having to clean my house, so I'll just stay here all afternoon. We'll continue procrastinating that particular chore. There's a question that came in from Sean that I wanted to address, and he was asking, so which comes first, high performing, talent dense teams, and I inquired transformation teams, or agile friendly management leadership organization. And as with every what comes first, obviously, if we were to draw the causal loops, they're impacting each other. So you're going to end up with chicken and egg problem here as well. However, I would say if we're waiting for agile friendly management leadership and organization, you're going to be waiting forever, because everything we're doing is challenging their power and authority. And a strong, talent dense agile team is going to be a thorn in everyone's side, because they are questioning and challenging and disrupting. That is
Yeah,
what they
really
do.
pushing the envelope.
Yeah. So what I've seen happen is sometimes it's accidental. So you end up hiring a couple of really great people, and then they bring in other great people, and then you end up forming this great little team that then can challenge and push, even if their management is not supportive and they don't have air cover, because they themselves know what's right and they support each other. It's easier if you have one layer of support. You don't have to have it all the way up and down. You do need to have someone above you, just like when in the examples that we were giving when we were on development teams doing this as well, someone above you that believes in what you're doing, even if they don't fully understand it, and really support you to challenge and to push. So one layer of support, awesome. You can build talent dense transformation organizations. If you're missing that, you can still do it, but you have to do it with people that have great personal integrity and a lot of safety nets, so they're not scared for their jobs. So people that are willing to fight for the cause, even at personal risk. It's a little bit easier to do if you have a layer above. That person then, obviously each layer is taking a hit, so they also have to be in a position where they're supportive. The goal is to keep challenging. If my management structure is too happy, I am not doing my job. I need to challenge them. Just the way I was talking about my management partner was when I was product owner would call me out all the time when I was overstepping the line. That didn't always feel good. I didn't always like it, but it was important that he did it. So that's the stuff that I'm looking for. Is you want just the edge of that tension, where they still trust you and listen to you, but you're still pushing against them. I know that's not exactly the answer you were looking for, Sean, but kind of gives you a little bit of where I'm looking at, where I'm kind of looking for how a team should fit. Yeah. And then Jean, I think you had a question to wrap up for us here, right?
Yeah, so this is actually a combination of a few people ping me offline, and also so I'm just gonna summarize it. So you and JP have mentioned in past and indirectly that kind of paraphrasing, before before conquering, you should really try to divide first. Delay scaling by all means until you absolutely need to scale. Um, Before you scale goodness, before you scale, you have to make sure you scale in goodness. So that was actually, it's very consistent with large scale Scrum as well. And you also mentioned that it's better to take your organization on the journey with a few more experienced people than too many that are not. Kind of all boils down to, you have to practice what you preach. You really cannot solve and I think you mentioned also something along the lines, you cannot you cannot really solve your problems with the same thinking that were used and created in the first place. That's for actually quoting them, Einstein, right? So I guess, so a few questions were sent to me directly, and there was some degree of hesitation, people not asking explicitly, what does it really mean to our organization, given the current organizational model that we see mostly out there? What are some of your sentiments? What are some of your views, and what have you seen, and what do you think it's all going to when you have these massive big bangs with too many people involved? What are your predictions or forecasting or anything? It's kind of an open-ended.
It's gotten better. So so JP and I have only ever worked in bureaucracies. It's kind of, well, look, we've made a career out of specializing in that.
Yep.
And
That's
these
just
big, gigantic,
facts.
yeah. It's better. It's way better than it was when I started. So I just
100%.
I want to lay that out there. It's still not good enough. So whenever I give talks, my primary goal, you say, okay, what's the point of the talk? To create fundamental dissatisfaction with the status quo. That is like the baseline of everything that I do. It's not good enough. You should ask for more, and you should not stop asking. So when we're in these organizations that are trying to roll out agility and are not living it, don't let them get away with that. If you're in one of these organizations and you're not living it, don't let yourself get away with that. Figure out a way to make noise, and to find others that feel the same way, and to make collective noise, and don't accept it. The moment we accept it is the moment we will just sink back into corporate depression. So that's my take on it. It's not good enough. We need to do better. I don't know if JP, if you had anything to add there.
I mean, all of that is very true. It's always difficult for me to recommend something in practice because context is everything. So, like in general, I always see a positive trend as well. I can, flash back to just 5 years ago, and today I can definitely see a trend in lots of different organizations towards something that's much more collaborative and much more agile and much more professional. So much of it, I believe, comes from just the legacy of the organizations themselves, that the culture is just so deeply entrenched that all of this stuff that we're talking about requires a lot of cultural change, and that it's really difficult to change it at huge scale, but it's relatively easy to change it in pockets as long as you're protected. So to Erin's point, around having that one or maybe hopefully a couple layers of air cover above you so that you can operate in a new way and establish a subculture that has a chance at becoming the dominant culture over time. It's hard, but if there's lots of examples of it happening. Microsoft has some really, really great examples. There's the classic example of when Amazon went, API first. That was a really big cultural change for them. So there's lots of examples of it happening out there. It's just finding a way to introduce that spark of change and then figuring out how in the world do I protect it from all of the wind in the organization, and how do I isolate this and keep it keep it sacred, keep it safe, let it bloom, and get what you can good out of it. You don't have to change the whole world to do that.
I will say, I will leave you with this little bit of hope. JP and I have made our entire careers out of being troublesome. Uh, troublesome being troublesome is not career suicide. We're doing quite well.
Not if you're good at it.
Yes, you have to be you have to be skillfully troublesome. So you have to learn when to push, when to pull back. You have to be very good at what you do. Like we work very hard to know what it is we're talking about. We
And for
continue.
the right reasons,
Mm,
right? I'm going to
yes.
quote John Lewis on that one about good trouble. If it is a righteous cause and you can prove it, and this is something that is going to be good for everyone involved. Those types of things, for sure.
So I would say please do not be afraid of getting in trouble. We talk with people a lot of time who say I can't challenge because I think I might lose my job. And when you actually walk through what might happen, losing your job is a very low chance. And even if it does happen, the job market's great right now, y'all. You'll be fine. Would you rather stand up for what's right and end up with a better job with better pay, or would you rather lower your head and be part of the problem? So I would say you need to get over that thing where nobody likes to be in trouble. It's not a fun feeling. Though every time you get in trouble, it feels a little bit better. And find a partner. So the fact that JP and I are often in trouble together makes it feel more
Makes
like
it easier.
makes it feel like the Breakfast Club rather than like
Right.
you're. So find a partner, find a group with that you can get in trouble with, and then go and make noise. Yeah.
So it sounds like the evolution of corporate rebellions for the good cause is well on the way, right? So I strongly support the sentiment.
Indeed.
So so I know we're a little bit over time, and I know I see some folks have already dropped. So first of all, I want to candidly thank you both, Erin and JP, for coming out and doing this for us. Also, I would like to believe that this is not the end of the journey for many, but just the beginning. And hopefully, this is going to be an inspiration for others to do something different and to maybe put some of these ideas to work and to challenge the untouchable and to just do things that are different, non-traditional within your respective organizations and communities. So, and I would like to make sure that the channel is wide open to both of you. So if anyone
Indeed.
wants to reach out and ask for advice or
Yeah, come find us on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
It's probably
easy
the
to
easiest way
find.
to get at us. Yeah.
I'll make sure that in my distribution your contact info is included. For those of you that are still here and would like to replay this, there will be a recording of this, and I'll load it up along with the slides Erin and JP shared with us, and brag about this. This is some of the thoughts that may rock the boat, but also may pave the road for many of you that are doing the right thing. Hopefully, you can put to use. All right.
Thanks
Well,
so much for the invite, Gene. It was a pleasure as always, and I'll
Yes,
see you.
thanks
I'll
so
see you
much,
tomorrow,
everyone.
JP. Yeah, I see you
Yeah.
every day, so I'll see you tomorrow.
My pleasure. Thank you, JP. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, everyone. Have a great
Thanks,
rest of
everyone.
the weekend, and have a great week.
All righty.
Okay. Cheers. Bye bye.